Welcome to Birds of a Feather, the Microcast, where we explore the power of intentional connection. Through real stories and practical insights, we uncover how meaningful relationships shape success, both in life and in work. And today's guest is Frederik Maris. Frederik co-founded EliteGTM and has recently signed on full-time as their Chief Revenue Officer. And he's also held senior executive roles leading sales at several notable companies such as ATOS Software, Zoom, DataRobot, Splunk, BMC, EMC, PTC, a lot of three-letter acronyms in there. That's actually really funny. Yeah, Frederik, we first met at DataRobot, and I remember having to sit down with you while I was working on the go-to-market strategies as part of the enablement team and sales execution team. I was building out some programs. I wanted to get some feedback from people and leaders in the field. You were in Europe. I was in Western US and covering Latin America. And years later, man, it's just amazing. You've continued to make yourself available to me. You've always leaned in to support. You've always been really accessible. And you don't owe me anything, but I certainly appreciate, I will forever be grateful for all of the help that you've lent to me throughout the days. So thanks for joining me today.
Welcome, and great to be here, Jeremy.
Awesome. So we usually kind of start these chats off with just getting a little bit of a baseline of what's happened in your life today. And there's been some really big, exciting news. So for everyone who's listening that might not know about EliteGTM, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you're focused on, why EliteGTM. Tell us a little bit about what's going on there.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, a year and a half ago when Dara and Ollie first pitched the idea to me, and I was, I think, one of the very first people that they pitched the idea to, they talked about actually having a network of people that they would be disruptive with in the recruitment industry. And instead of having your recruiters on board and working a traditional model, the idea was to build a huge network of top people in the SaaS industry, and through that network being able to recruit much faster at a much cheaper cost, and because of the references at a higher quality as well. And that's being built out now into different areas. So literally today we're launching the Sales Academy. So we're basically offering go-to-market services. Recruitment is part of it. Development is part of it as well. There's things like fractional work that we're working on and building offerings for. So there's really lots going on, but the core is really, and I think that's the reason why I decided to join the team, because there's a million recruiters out there. There's a million people offering their services out there. But we have something that I don't think many people have, and that's that network of 400, 500, 600 people by now. Top salespeople that are members that give so much access to pretty much anything and everything. Referral program, think about that, right? And if you think about just prospecting, prospecting was very important for us at Atos. And because of that, LinkedIn picks up that you want to look at those posts, and you see so many posts about prospecting. And prospecting is hard, but it is so much easier if you actually know people. Cold prospecting, warm prospecting, or hot prospecting, right? If you know people, you can call up somebody, you call me up, or I call you up. That's a very different conversation than if I'm just calling somebody that I've never, that's never heard about me. And I think that's really the power and the reason why I said, I want to do something different. I've been on the operating side, and this is still operating, but I've been on the vendor side for many years, working for bosses, some of them great, some of them not so great. And now just with two guys founding a company, running the company, and seeing if we can make something interesting out of it.
Yeah, it's awesome. You've got a really incredible track record of senior leadership roles and building high performance sales cultures. And I mean, man, you name something that you haven't sold, I'd be surprised at this point, which is really cool. But it takes a lot, and prospecting is the core especially in the, excuse me, in this day and age with software, there's just a ton of noise out there, right? So like it's harder for buyers to make decisions because you go to the supermarket and you go try and pick up a can of soup, and you're looking at like 5,000 different cans of soup, and it's pretty hard to make a call sometimes. But I want to just double click on something you said, which is, prospecting doesn't need to be hard, but it can be. And you mentioned how it really becomes a lot easier if, based on who you know. And this network that you're building with EliteGTM is, now I'm actually part of the team, part of EliteGTM as a member, and it's awesome. Like, but that's 600 people. Like, how do you even keep up with that many people? And maybe that's a good question for you. Like, what's your approach to like just staying in contact with the right people at the right times?
Well, that's a really interesting question. That's something I'm going to experience. In all fairness, I've just basically started last couple of days, and obviously I know quite a few people. I don't know if you've read that. I think Gore does it as well. So there's a natural size of a community that you can keep up with, and it basically goes back to when we were cavemen and when we were still, hunting and farming the earth thousands of years ago. That about over 150 people, so up to 150 people, you pretty much know everybody. But after that, it becomes bigger, and you can't manage that group anymore. So per definition then, and Gore, so Gore Technologies, Gore-Tex and everything, I think they build factories of 150 people, and then they build the next one, and then they build the next one, because they don't get the interaction anymore. And I think I'm going to try to figure out, we obviously have different roles and different types and different regions and everything. So you're never going to have the greatest, let me just turn that off, sorry. You're never going to have the greatest relationship with everybody out of those 600 people. And I'm going to have to filter out and probably get to something like 150 people that I do, actively spend time with and keep up with and understand what they're doing and what's going on. Because again, that being in the middle of understanding what those people are doing, we're almost kind of matchmakers and brokers from a certain perspective. And then how do you put a certain need together with the supply on the other side?
Yeah, and the data you're talking about comes from an Oxford professor, Robin Dunbar, who talks about Dunbar's number, right? Like this is the maximum cognitive capacity we have for these meaningful relationships, but those circles get a lot bigger, right? Like whether it's 600 people in EliteGTM, or think about all the different sales professionals, and not just like the people working directly in your org, but all of the heroes in the sales ops teams, and like the legal teams, and the customer teams, and the partner teams, like throughout your whole career. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it's in the tens of thousands of people that you've come across and built relationships with over the time. And you're right, like your balls are going to drop at some point. But I think it's interesting, like building the systems that allow us to scale, which is kind of what we're focusing on. Like, where's the technology aspect of keeping us accountable and surfacing the right people at the right time and helping us to scale that way, but not at the cost of taking the person out of it. So it's awesome. I know that the team at EliteGTM is going to be kicking ass even more with you on board.
And I think the concept, Jeremy, is really interesting, because the world, obviously we're not the same anymore as when we were dwelling in caves, and everything's been automated. This is an area that's not really been automated. If you look, I've got 6,000 plus LinkedIn connections. That becomes, part of it is meaningless. Maybe half I don't even remember. You're trying to figure out, when did I meet them, who are they, and it's, if you can help to bring that 150 to a larger scale, then that's something that's incredibly valuable, I would think.
Yeah. And the other part of it too is how do you do that with only 24 hours in a day? and not losing sight of the human piece of it too, because at the end of the day, like, trust is built through effort. And we'll talk a little bit more about, you know, some of the lessons that you've had. But I do really believe that, like, you got to earn that seat next to somebody, at least for long term. Like, someone might be open and willing to trust you, especially in like the recruiting industry. I think it's amazing. And we've talked to some different recruiters and partners with EliteGTM, and you know, just in the context of relationship intelligence, and it's a long-term trusted relationship. Because we're not placing this person in this company at this time and then 10 days later moving them to another company. But like, how do we continue to keep that snowball rolling? But I want to go back to something that I was curious to hear a little bit about. So like, you obviously had a really exciting run in some incredible companies. Maybe a little bit more of like the traditional sales kind of corporate track up into sales leadership. You know, how did you how do I say this? How did you come to a place in your mind where you're like, hey, this is what I know, these are the things that I do, to like, okay, I'm going to kind of take this parallel track now? What was that thought process like? And, you know, I bet there's probably some deep thoughts there. It's not a small decision for sure.
That's an interesting one, because I also maybe, you know, slightly different than some other people. Some people have their whole career planned out from today. They know exactly where they want to be in a year, in 3 years, in 10 years. And I believe that life kind of flows. And yes, you have a big impact on where it's going to take you, but at the same time, you also need to let it flow. And some of the things have happened because of people that I've met. And if I feel a strong connection, something feels really good, then in some occasions I've actually said, okay, let's do it. I remember 1 or 2 times that I've actually said yes, and then we couldn't get it done because of, you know, some reasons. And I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. I do know that some of the decisions I made actually turned out, you know, very well and very helpful. And that the knowing the important people and being able to go back to those important people, even, you know, years later, is something that that has actually helped me to find several roles.
Yeah, I was thinking about kind of the arc of our chat here, and I wanted to get your take on how relationships have actually impacted your career. So it's a perfect segue. But before I do that, just going back to like what you're building at EliteGTM, and I know the team, and I'm keenly aware of like all the cool stuff you're working on, but I'm sure some people are just getting exposed to it. Can you tell us a little bit about like the academy? Because I know that is new. It's like fresh off the press. What's that? Who's involved? Like, tell us a little bit more about like what that means.
So the academy is meant, the first version is meant for basically AEs, for salespeople, and it's based on the playbook, and it goes through all the different modules to explain, you know, why should there be first of all, why should we develop? And we have a really cool interview with Jeremy Duggan and Luca Lazaron as an intro, and then we go into the different modules to describe, you know, why do you need a sales process? Why does it need to be repeatable? How does it need to follow the buyer's buying process instead of only what, you know, salespeople want? And then all the different modules. I'm actually going through it right now. I'm looking at every single module, and I think it's really cool. And the good thing is, it's not, some of these training, you know, platforms and everything, they've been done by people that haven't sold in 5 or 10 years time. This is from people that are in the field every single day and still are. So we've got members of the community doing different modules, and we have like the theory part, but then we also have the interviews with the members to talk us through some of the examples, some of the stories, some of the war stories in that specific area. And then that's the online part. And then what we're also doing on a monthly basis, we're doing like deal clinics, we're doing Ask Me Anythings, we're having founders speak to the community about starting up companies. So there's a lot more value which is being done on a monthly basis as well. And then in 6 months' time, we're actually going to come out with the next version, which is likely to be more focused on management than on just selling. So we're going to continue to add to it, and we're also going to continue to update it to keep it modern. And if you see the impact of AI these days in sales compared to 3-4 years ago, it's incredible. It's just massive.
Mind blowing. The speed at which things are moving is just incredible. And I want to like double underline and press bold on what you said. Like traditional sales enablement, I've had a few years in sales enablement and sales enablement technology and programs and stuff like that. It gets pretty stale pretty quickly because there's so much change that's happening. But even more importantly is what you said about like real people who know in their fabric of their soul, through getting bloody noses and broken bones, through the battles of losing and the victories of, are the ones that are actually like driving. And so for everyone who's out there listening, you should definitely check it out. It's really incredible. And I love that you start with why, because, I always talk about people, especially people I've hired, like I can't get you to lace up your cleats and get to the field at 4 o'clock in the morning. You have to have that personal connection in order to have the discipline to keep going. So that's really awesome. Definitely wishing you guys the best success. So let's talk a little bit more about that, right? You were saying that, hey, these are the people that I've met. These are the relationships that I've built. Like this is kind of like a curated ecosystem. And, we're talking a little bit about how hard that is to manage, but maybe you could just tell us a little bit more. Think back to like early days, PTC days, even before that, over the course of your arc. What have relationships really meant over that period of time to you?
I think for me, there was barely a before PTC because I worked for a reseller for 9 months and then I joined PTC. So I was very fortunate to get recruited at quite a young age. And I think that really built the foundation of my career. And to the point where when I left EMC at the end of 2010, and I still specifically remember this, it was Friday evening, and I was sitting with my wife by the fireplace, and I said, I need to find a new job. And I picked up my phone. It was like 9 or 10 o'clock in the evening in the Netherlands, 3-4 o'clock East Coast, and I called John McMahon. And I said, hey, John, I've had something here, left EMC, and they've been trying to recruit me at BladeLogic. It just didn't make sense for me at that time to come over. But I said, hey, I'd be very interested to talk to you guys about potentially doing something. And then he said, well, that's pretty crazy. I'm actually in Amsterdam for QBR next week. So this was literally Friday evening, and he said, come by Monday evening in Hoofddorp at the hotel, 7 o'clock. We sat down, and then I think a couple of days later, I sat down with Luca, interviewed with him, interviewed with Jeremy, and 2 weeks later, I signed my agreement, and I was there for 4 years. And I think I had a similar one after I tried working for 2 Dutch companies, which didn't work out so well. I've always done well for US companies, and when I tried with the Dutch, it didn't work out. And then I'd had a personally difficult time as well. I went through depression, and it was at the point where I was like, I got my shit together again. I was ready to work. And I was like, okay, what do I do? And I called Willem Hendricks, and Willem was one of the PTC guys as well. He joined PTC later than I did, but he was really great guy, very smart, driven. He was going through the ranks quickly. And as that happened, I went to Asia. He was active in the Benelux region, I think we both saw each other and respected each other. And he'd gone to EMC, and I called Willem and I said, hey, basically same thing. I want to do something interesting. I'm looking for a job. And he said, come on over. I think again, a week, 2 weeks later, he hired me, and we worked together for years. And it's, if you know people, the good and the bad and the ugly, because nobody's perfect, and everybody has their quirks as well. But if you know that up front, and you know how people are going to perform, and you know that you can trust them, which is one of the biggest things, right? Do I ask something one time, and when I get the answer, can I trust that answer that to the best of their ability, they've given me the information that I need? Or do I need to spend another 10 minutes asking so many more questions to try to understand if they've conveniently forgotten something, or they're not telling me something, or they're bullshitting me, or whatever, right? Those are so different. And that just goes back to relationships, because relationships are based on trust. They're based on time spent with each other. And that's what makes them so powerful. And in the end, it's something that I've kind of, when hopefully not too soon, but when you're going to be in a bed, and life is going to be behind you for the very, very, very largest part, you're not going to be thinking about the deal that you closed, or the commission check that you got from a certain deal. You're going to be thinking about the relationships you've built up with people, and the fun you've had, and the experiences you've had. So I think from that perspective, that relationship part, it really speaks dearly to my heart.
Yeah, and I'm so happy that just to hear that. I mean, even what you're talking about is like, nobody's perfect. I mean, my wife will be the first person to say I'm far from perfect. I like to at least admit that also. But we've all got our blemishes, and we all can be strong in a lot of ways too. But it also, in a lot of cases, takes a lot of self-awareness to recognize like who we are as people, to be able to even be in a space to open up, to earn that trust with other people, which is really what the heart of relationship intelligence is. It's not just about like me being conscious of myself, but it's about us as two people, or more than two people. What are we doing? How are we leaning in? And you're right, on at that last final mile, like looking back on things, were you a good person? Did you try your best? And how was the experiences with the people that touched your lives? And I couldn't agree with you more. And I really think that like that trusted relationship is kind of like forged through hardship. And a lot of people talk about this, and this was actually one of like the core tenets of building Feather, is that we've over rotated into these social media platforms where like they're designed for broadcasting content, but they're not designed for deepening connection. So you calling up John McMahon and being able to like reignite that connection doesn't happen because once every couple of weeks you send a meme to somebody. It happens because you lost a bunch of deals, and you had hard conversations, and you won, and you put in the effort to like build trust. And like you mentioned, you kind of get in that position where that follows you. So when someone you're talking to picks up the phone and they know who you are, they can bet on you. But that takes a lot of effort. I think
it's the same thing with customers. It's all good and great to build a deal with somebody, and when things go well, but what happens when the shit hits the fan, right? Do you come through then? And if you come through, that's really when the relationships are built. Because up to that moment, you haven't proven yourself, right? You've promised something good, but then coming through on that, and especially delivering when the going gets tough, that's the best way to build champions, right? You obviously need to build champions during your sales cycle, but if you can go through a difficulty and then fix that so that the person you've built that relationship with actually realizes and knows that you're going to stay with them, you're going to come through with them, then you've pretty much built a champion for life.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. And I've also mentioned this in a couple of situations where like champions aren't just the people on the field that are signing a check at the end of the deal, right? Like we got champions inside our teams, we got champions of us that are our leaders, we got champions of us that are just rooting for us on the sideline, that are in companies that we used to work with, that are in different companies. And there's a lot of relationships that you have to come through with. So it's inevitable that the balls get dropped. We were talking about having that many, but I'm curious to kind of just get your thoughts on, like, is there any relationships that stand out to you where, maybe there's a story around, hey, like this was a tough lesson, I kind of dropped the ball. How did that experience shape your intentionality around putting in the effort with people?
Before I answer that question, let me just, the internal thing is super important as well, because you're only as productive as your environment is going to make you. And if you need to place 5 calls to get something done internally every single time, and it's going to take a day or whatever, a couple of hours, then you're not going to be quick and fast and be able to respond and get to your customers either. If you build internal champions and they know that when you ask them something, you're going to deliver for them, and you're going to act with honesty, integrity, and with urgency, and you're going to then they're going to put your request on top of the list instead of somewhere on the bottom of the list, right? And those things make it's just creating an environment where people want to work with you, want to be with you. That is something that, and it goes back to what we were discussing earlier regarding the happiness advantage. It creates success, and being in an environment where people have a smile on their face, that it creates energy. It gives you extra so you can continue to drive, and it doesn't suck up the energy.
Yeah.
But then coming back on a difficult lesson, I remember a very specific difficult lesson, and this was one with one of the Dutch companies. It was actually a startup as well. When I joined, we were 10, 15 people, and some very smart people that ended up doing some very interesting things with some other companies. But the ethics were, I'll be polite and I'll say, very questionable. And I ended up in a situation where I found out that they were just, basically screwing me. They were telling things that were not true. And even when I figured out that I needed to go because it was affecting my mood, it was affecting my mental health, everything. And I took it personal, and that's one of the lessons is, we play a game, and if you can see it as a game, and I like to play the game with passion, and I also want the game to be meaningful, because if you take too much emotion out of it, you lose that passion, you lose that enthusiasm. But sometimes you're going to play with people that don't want to play the game you want to play, and I didn't handle that well, and I ended up in a meeting with the board where just half an hour before that, with the guy who I'd made all the agreements, we discussed through what we're going to do with the car, what we're going to do with this, what we're going to do with. We were both. I think we had the I don't know what it's called, but the guarantee for the bank account. And then 30 minutes later in the meeting, we'd agreed on these things. And then 30 minutes later in the meeting, I said, well, this is what we agreed. And the guy just looks at me and says, no, we didn't. And I lost my mind. I'm like, what? Seriously, what the fuck? I mean, you just said, this, and this. No, I didn't. The guy was just, flat in my face, was lying. And then I lost it. And the board was looking at me like I was some kind of maniac that was out of my mind. And the guy was just, lying and playing with me and everything. And it's important to be able to work with people that you trust. And then I think my biggest lesson there was, you can't take that shit personal, because they'll do it with anybody, right? That's the way that they did their business. And it's not to me personally, although I felt it that way. And I think that's the distinction you need to make, and somehow the awareness you need to have, so you stay cool, so you can actually, you don't go into your emotion, but you can you basically stay smart, stay sharp, and can get even or can win that discussion versus losing it because you lost it.
Yeah, that sounds like an uncomfortable situation. I remember I was working a deal back at the App Dynamics days for a healthcare tech company, had a champion VP level. We rolled into the CIO's office. I was with Brian Dell, so if Brian's listening, he'll get a kick out of this. But right as we were about to go present our business case and sit down with the CIO and the SVP of tech, this guy that I thought was my champion basically stood up and walked out of the room to take another call and left. And here I was meeting these two very prickly individuals who never sanctioned this guy's kind of skunk works project, and I just didn't even know. And so we came in with all of the evidence on why this was a good decision, but it wasn't their idea. And it sucks to be left at the altar like that with somebody that you put in the effort and the time. I guess coming out of that, right? You've done a lot of speaking engagements. You've impacted a lot of teams. You've built, lots of different cultures. Recently, you were at the We Are Sales conference talking about the art and science of champion building. And you hit on something I think really matters, whether it's a customer champion or an internal champion. Like trust is kind of that key foundation. So how do you screen for that now a little bit more? What's some of the science behind building those kind of relationships, and how are you thinking about that from that experience?
Well, it's there's a clear 4-step champion building process, and the first one is you need to identify potential champions. So if you're looking, and in sales we are looking for something, whether it's internal or external. If it's internal, you need approvals, you need quick turnaround from legal or whatever. You need to understand who the people are that are going to be willing to help you, because if somebody's incredibly conservative within legal, they're not going to be inclined to quickly turn around things. And I wouldn't say cut corners, but go out of their way to help you, right? That's you need to understand what type of person am I dealing with, so that you can identify the people that you want to go after, so that the chances that building those people out are going to be, your return is going to be as high as possible. It is then on how you deal with them and how you build up that relationship, because it's not instant. That trust needs to grow, and it's from small things. So you basically have to give things up front. Some people ask for things immediately. You're not going to get anything, because you need to, if you want to get something, you need to give first, or at least that's my experience, and that's the way I think it's worked pretty well for me. But if you only give and you never ask for something back, you never get anything back, then you're not being productive either. So you need to find the right balance. You need to find the moment where you can ask for something back. But that's where, in my mind, I think authenticity is super important. And if people get the feeling that you're telling them the truth, and it's because I tell the truth, right? That's just who I am. And the good thing is I don't need to remember, what did I tell you? What did I tell somebody else? What did I tell somebody else there? Because I need to make sure that the right story comes out. I just tell the story, which is, the current situation. And some people might not like it, which is tough, but it's better that they know, and that at least they know that I'm going to tell them that something's not good. And I think that helps to speed up the process of that, champion building process of building up that trust. And then obviously with the other parts of the science, it just makes it that you end up, I think, being reasonably successful.
Yeah, it has definitely a compounding impact, and our brands follow us, kind of like you were saying, right? Whether it's picking up the phone, reaching out to an old colleague years later, who we are definitely comes with us. And these lessons come from like the hardship and learning them, unfortunately, skin knees, as they say. But with that, also comes real great success. So I'd love to hear maybe what comes to top of mind, Frederik, when I ask you, tell us a story about one of your best relationships or your strongest champions, or, one where you're particularly excited about how that kind of, you two leaned into each other.
Oh, there's a couple of good ones, but there's actually one that goes back, like really back to the old days. I was a rep for only 7 quarters at PTC. And I think somewhere in my second or third quarter, I was working on a Dutch company in the semiconductor business. And through a guy who was running the R&D department, so that the building of the new machines, he really liked the product, and he bought a couple of licenses, and he actually introduced me to the CEO of the company. And they needed to shorten their time from getting an order in to delivering the product, because it had to be built specifically for the products that the customer was trying to develop. So they had a machine, and the machine had 80% was standard components, but 20% was based on the product that the customer needed to build. And that 20%, that took them somewhere about 42, 46 weeks. And I still know this after, a couple decades, which is scary. And I told them with Pro Engineer, with PTC, today you're doing this process in a very sequential way, and with PTC, with Pro Engineer, we can do things in parallel. I said, I don't know exactly how long it's going to take and how that process looks, but I can find out if you give me an opportunity to do an audit within your organization. Then I need to speak to like 15, 16, 17 people, and if you could send them a note letting them know that I'm going to be coming and that they should be open to me. And I did that. I did that over, I think, 2 or 3 weeks. And then I went back to them, and with the CEO of the company, and we had it ended up being like I think we started around 5:30, and I think we got done by 7:30, 8 o'clock. So we had like 2.5 hour meeting, and I just took him through his process. And I think it was clear to him that I knew probably more or at least as much about his company than most of the people at his company did, and unbiased and no politics. And then I showed him how we could do those things, and we took it into a proof of value, and we ended up doing a really big deal there. And the cool thing was I was a young kid, I was a young rep, in my late 20s, and this was CEO of the company. And because of that process, I built up so much credibility with him that after that, I would reach out to a secretary and I would let him know, hey, Frederik called, could you please ask this person to, and I still remember his name, obviously, but can you ask this person to call me back, please? And I didn't even need to leave a message about what it was about. He would call me back and he said, hey, Frederik, you called. And I think that was just, I've had several of these very powerful champions that you've built in the deals that you've done, and some with some cool stories as well, which we should probably discuss another time. But that's the cool thing about those relationships and those champions is you remember them for life, right? Because you build up a relationship, and like that's weeks and weeks and sometimes months of work, because it took another, I think, 6 months before we closed the deal with that company, before we closed the big deal, right? And during that time, you're constantly. I actually had a bit of a skirmish with the procurement guy, and he helped me out. He stood up and he backed the procurement guy down a bit, and that's just it was. I thought it was a great example.
It is a great example, and it's so cool when that really comes together. But your point you mentioned before, which I thought was really spot on, which is it's not just about giving endlessly, but you do need to go and give first. when you're an unvetted, untrusted, and you have something that you're trying to go, like you're taking the first move, right? But you also have to know when to ask. And so whether that's asking for help with navigating a complex procurement process, or a prickly competitor who's out there running rampant in the account, or it really does take more deposits than withdrawals. And we talk about like the bank of, champions in a lot of cases. I think it's fascinating how when you do that over extended periods of time, and you do it with the right heart, and you do it with, hey, like at the end of this, there's a pot of gold for both of us. Let's figure out what that means to you. What's that look like to you? Let's architect for that for you. And I'm going to win also, and we're going to win together.
Right. That's really what you do, right? Because you need that has to be a common goal. And it was clear that for them, it was the reduction in lead time. For us, it was obviously getting the deal. And we were totally aligned there. And if you do that, then good things happen.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's also what's interesting about champion building. It's one of the hardest things to go scale in teams, because it's such a personal thing. It is about how you are conscious of the delivery of that, and how do you build trust, and what are the things that you do that strengthen this relationship, because your relationship with that one person is going to be different than your relationship with another person, situationally, timing, persona, mental type, and all of that. It's very unique. And so, one of the things that we like to kind of wrap up here with is just getting the feedback from our guests. Like, for anyone who's listening out there, Frederik, what would you say is one thing that someone can put into practice that can help them build and maintain these key relationships, and help them level up in this area?
Personally, I think I would come back to the authenticity. If people believe that you're actually, you're going to do what you say, and you're going to say what you do, then that's the way. I think that's game changing. Because it goes to that pot of gold, right? If that pot of gold is not there, if you can't define it's back to a value pyramid as well. If you can't build a value pyramid and it doesn't make sense, there's no connection between what the company's trying to do and what you're trying to offer, you're just pushing and pushing and pushing. You're never going to get there. It's just not going to happen. And so it's being genuinely trying to help somebody, and finding a way to do that, and letting them know that you're there to actually make that happen, pretty much whatever it takes. And I think that's authenticity there is super important, because people will feel that. And we're still humans, we're still highly sensitive, and we don't always know it, but that, gut feel, something's coming from somewhere, is telling you, I like this person, I don't like that person, or I trust this person, I don't like that, I don't trust that person. I don't know where it's coming from, but somewhere it's there, and people are usually right. And if you have the right intentions, then people will trust you.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. But I want to pressure test that with a thought that's going through my mind, which is it's being authentic and genuine and showing up for people. But in some cases, being authentic can get misconstrued with like just, I say like wearing your heart on your sleeve. I like to try and be who I am, and and in some cases that definitely hasn't helped progress my career, but at least people know who they're dealing with. So like just going one click deeper, how do you navigate the mind? Because we're talking about champions and relationships that are not just customers. These are our peers. In a lot of cases, they're fighting for the same promotion. These are our competitors, and they're trying to maybe beat us in opportunities. So like, how do you show up authentically? It's a tough one, but how do you show up authentically without stepping on a minefield? You follow where I'm going with that?
Yeah, no, I listen, I totally get that, because I think, first of all, as a Dutch guy, we're usually pretty direct. And I don't necessarily think it's always helped my career, certainly in the earlier years. And I, on a couple of occasions, I've actually had the coaching or the guidance to be more political, and to work closer with and to tell people, manage up and tell people more what they want to hear. I've kind of, it might have done well for me. And at the same time, I also want to be authentic to myself, because I don't want to do things that I don't believe in, or I don't want to do things that I don't, that just don't sit well with me. And in that case, you know, it might take a little bit longer, or maybe I might not be in the right environment at a certain point in time, because I do think that there's a, you know, work is important and success is important, but life, being happy is probably the most important thing, right? Back to when we're going to die, we're not going to be thinking about how much money we made or how many promotions we got, but we're going to be thinking about, did I live a good life? Did I have people that loved me? Did I love people around me? You know, did I enjoy life? And that enjoyment also comes from working with the right people. So if people don't want to hear what I have to say, am I in the right environment then, right? And that might be tough, but I think certainly for the mid to long run, it will help you live a better life. And I think that's how I end that part.
That is that's some real deep and wise words there, Frederik. I think it's incredible, and kind of the core of relationship intelligence, like at the heart and soul of this practice on finding people and investing in each other and unlocking the best in one another, takes being vulnerable and being authentic. And, you know, not everybody is going to be in that 500 or 150 persons or 50 person or 10 person circle.
Yep.
And not forever, right? And people are constantly moving and changing. And so it's really insightful. But yeah, like, live a good life, have some fun, be happy, work with people that you enjoy working with. I couldn't agree with you more. This conversation's been amazing. And, you know, the stories that you shared really kind of illuminate why it's so critical to be deliberate about our relationships and how it matters beyond just work, how it makes an impact on our life. And so for everyone who's listening, if you found value in our discussion today, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Make sure you check out what Frederik and the team are doing at EliteGTM. And if anyone's interested in seeing how Feather and our team is looking at building more intelligent approach to relationship management, the unity of technology and an emotional connection, check out www.feather.vip. My name's Jeremy. This has been Birds of a Feather, and I'll see you next time.